Good morning, everyone. I hope you all have had a wonderful week. I know many of you got to spend some time with your student over the past week or so. And so we hope if you did get a chance to see your student that you had a really nice visit. My name is Lenan Yundestead. I'm the Director of New Student and Family Programs here at VCU. And we are really excited to talk with you today about housing. So I know that this is something that's on a lot of your minds, and if it's not already, I'm sure it will be over the next month or so as your student comes home for winter break and is thinking about what their housing options may be for next year, either on or off campus. And so I'm very excited today to have with me Dr. Kevin Wade from Residential Life and Housing here at VCU, as well as Lisa Matthews-Aylesworth, who's from our Off-Campus Student Services office within the Dean of Students office, and they're both going to talk to you about what the options are, what the processes are for considering both, and how to move forward and maybe start a conversation with your student about where to live next year. So as always, we will record today's webinar and we'll make it available a little bit later on. But if you are joining us live, stick with us. We'll have an opportunity for you to ask some questions live. You can either do that as you go along by utilizing the chat function at the very bottom of your screen. If you just click that, I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll let Dr. Wade and Lisa know if there are questions that need to be addressed as we go along. Or if you'd prefer to save your question for the end, we can ask questions live by having you unmute yourself or type in the chat box, whatever you prefer. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to, I believe, Kevin, are you going first?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
All right, everybody, again, welcome. I'm going to talk about topics related to on-campus housing, specifically for students who are currently freshmen and are going to be sophomores next year, so a rising sophomore population. The process for returning students is significantly different than it was when they came in as first-year students. I'm going to go through a few different things. I'm going to pop up a slideshow in a second, but wanted to show you something else. Over the winter break, we're going to be sending a booklet home to all students currently living on campus about the returning student process. This is what the cover is going to look like. This is sort of the proof. It goes to print probably tomorrow. So I'll be looking for that. It'll be sent to home addresses for all of our students that are on campus. So I am going to, where's my cursor? There it is. I'm going to share a slideshow with y'all and get started. All right. So as I said, I'm going to talk about the returning student on-campus housing process. And why isn't it letting me switch pages? Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to talk about why live on campus, similar things you would have heard when you came to orientation this past summer. Then we're going to talk about the process, what's different from last year, specifically what's different from going through it as an incoming student versus as a returning student. Talk about the timeline and dates, talk about the application itself, differences between last year's application as an incoming student and the current application, and then talk about students needing accommodations. Then going to show and talk about some housing options, and then going to answer a question that we're going to get a lot of: do we have enough housing? So the first thing, why live on campus? We know from research that students are more likely to stay connected to VCU when they live on campus. They're more likely to do things like join clubs, organizations, or as a sophomore, continue to participate in clubs and organizations, intramural sports, go to the library, attend study sessions, speak with faculty outside of class, and all of those things lead towards a student's success in the classroom. So that means higher GPAs, they graduate sooner, they're more likely to graduate. They also learn transferable life skills. They're going to learn things that not will only help them, you know, in their living situations when they have an apartment or something after they graduate from VCU, but also interpersonal skills and working with potential coworkers or team members and different things in their career. That we spend a lot of time focusing on those type of interpersonal skills and how to work with one another. And those are all very valuable things that a student gets from living on campus. Again, if a student lives off campus, it's not to say those things can't happen. It's just they're more readily available, and we know they're more likely to happen for a student who lives on campus. So if a student does choose to live off campus, again, I would encourage them to do things like make sure they join clubs and organizations, make sure they continue to go to the library like they did when they lived on campus as a freshman, that they continue to participate in things like clubs and organizations or intramurals. And my phone is ringing. I don't know how to turn it off. There we go. All right. So next thing is talking about the process. So I want to compare and contrast the process for a new student as well as for a returning student. Little thing over here. All right. So a student completes the application and pays the $250 prepayment. In order to participate and get assigned, they had to complete that application and pay that $250. As a returning student, they still have to complete the application, but there is no $250 prepayments. They don't have to pay a prepayments. So that's different. So there's that money doesn't need to be put up front as a returning student. Second thing, sorry, my phone's ringing again. I don't know. Here we go. Oh, there it is. Is the assignments were made based on the application date as an incoming student. The quicker you complete the application, the more likely you were to get your first choice. As a returning student, the application is made based upon student classification. And in this sense, classification means what year are they in school? Are they a rising sophomore, rising junior, rising senior? And depending upon which group they fall into, will have an impact on sort of where they can pick a room and when they can pick a room. The most important thing to know, though, is that when we look at priorities, who's the most important student as far as housing is concerned? Or let me put that differently. What is our number one priority as far as populations to house? Number one is incoming first-year students. And the reason being, we know they have the most need. They're the students that have the most questions. They're the students that need the most support when they're at VCU because they're new. The second priority is our sophomore class. They know more than the first year students do, but they're still getting their feet underneath them. So when we do our returning student process, when students are able to come in and select a room, the first group, the lowest, or I should say the earliest selection times are going to be our rising sophomores. They'll actually pick a room before the juniors and seniors, with two exceptions, and I'll explain that in a minute. The next difference is, as an incoming student, staff assigns students. So we take those applications and we assign them to a place based upon their preferences. As a returning student, they'll actually have the opportunity to go in, look at what's available, and choose their own specific assignment. They can say, I want this specific room in this building, and click on it and assign themselves. The last thing is, as an incoming first-year student, they could list a roommate preference. So they could say, this is who I'd like to live with. And if we could, we would assign them together as long as they both selected one another. As a returning student, they actually produce and create roommate groups. So they can live with up to 3 other people. So they can create a group so that when they go to select a room, one person can log in for the group and assign everybody else. All right, so those are the main differences there. So as a returning student, there's a lot more control they have themselves in being able to assign themselves versus as a first-year student, they kind of throw their name in there and we assign them where the chips may fall. All right, so the next thing is to talk about the timeline. I've highlighted 4 dates on this list because those are the dates that are most important to rising sophomores. So as I mentioned, they have to complete an application. January 17th, which is a Friday, is when that application will open. They can go in at any point in time and complete that application up until noon on February 7th. Because one thing I'll say about this list is every single one of these dates, everything starts and ends at noon. So application will open at noon and close at noon on those 2 dates. There's no benefit in filling out the application earlier other than just getting out of the way and making sure you don't forget to do it. Because again, if they don't complete the housing application, they won't be able to participate in the process. They won't be able to select a room. So if on February 8th, the student comes to me and says, I didn't do my application yesterday, can I live on campus? The answer is no, they're gonna have to wait until the summer to see if housing is available then. So they wanna make sure they get that completed. And as I'd mentioned previously, there is no $250 prepayment. So they should be able to do that fairly quickly. They don't list preferences or anything, they're just filling out the application because again, they'll be able to pick their own room and be able to assign their own roommates. February 12th is same room sign up. I'd mentioned there are 2 exceptions to the statement that sophomores pick first, and this is the first one. Students who are currently living on campus that choose to remain in their same room, So they are living in Ackle, which is one of our upper class apartments currently, and they want to stay there next year. They have the opportunity on February 12th to do so. Sometimes it's called homesteading, sometimes it's called squatting, but they have the ability to pick that room. So that's the one place where a returning student, a returning upper class student, rising junior or senior, can pick before a sophomore. And then on the 18th, they are able to pull in roommates to fill that unit, including roommates that potentially could be rising sophomores. February 25th is the other time where potentially juniors and seniors will be picking before sophomores, and that is the Living and Learning Programs sign up. Living and Learning Programs are, there's 4 different ones. There is LEAD, there is Innovate, there is Aspire, and then there is Globe. And these are programs that students can choose to participate in. There's a separate application process. There's information on our website about this. So if a student is in one of those programs and they have designated spaces on campus that are sort of set aside, that's the date they'll be able to pick a room there. So that same room sign up and Living and Learning program are the 2 times where a junior or senior would be able to pick a room before the sophomores do. Now on the 16th is when we will send out selection time slots. And so what that means is all the students who have yet to pick a room or be pulled in will get an email saying on March 18th at 2 o'clock is your turn to pick a room. Or on March 19th at 2 o'clock, it's your turn to pick a room. And I just realized this is the 29th, it should say the 19th. So on March 16th, they'll get that email. It will let them know when they can pick a room. So on the 18th, they'll be able to log in at that specific time and be able to pick a room based upon what is available. So whoever has the best time in a group, so let's say I'm in a group of 4, and my time is 8 o'clock at night, but my one of the group members is noon, we would use the noon time, and we could log in at that point in time. We could pick a room, and we could all sign up for that room together. Again, let's say I'm in class, but my friend is not. He could do it, and he could assign me as well. Because we all agree to be in the group, we select confirmation, and it gives the other students the ability to assign us. March 19th, sorry, I should say the 19th, not the 20th, the 29th, is when juniors and seniors and graduate student will be able to select rooms. So again, rising sophomores go first. So that is the timeline there. But again, January 17th and February 7th are the next 2 dates you're going to want to be looking at and thinking about and talking with your students about when the application opens and when the application closes. But again, you'll get this in the mail over winter break that has all of this information and a lot more. So the application, again, there's no $250 prepayment. They don't do preferences. They just fill it out because they're picking and they're assigning themselves. They must complete to participate, and that's a link to where you can find it. If you go to our front page of the housing.vcu.edu, there's a tab up top that says application. You click on that, and it takes you right to the application to complete it. And again, that won't go up until January 17th. But on that date, they'll want to go ahead and do it just so they can get that done. So accommodations, if a student needs any type of accommodation, whether it's for a physical accommodation or psychological accommodation, emotional support, animal service, animal, that type of stuff, they must submit a request through the Student Access and Educational Opportunity Office. If they currently have an accommodation, it's the same thing they've done before. If they have an existing accommodation, they don't need to resubmit it, but if they have something that's changed or a new accommodation, they'd want to do that as well. We ask that they do that in line with the application process, so we want to make sure they do that by February 7th. That way, if we need to assign anybody to a handicap accessible space, we can make sure we do that before we start assigning other students. Housing options. So we have a number of things that are different for returning students versus first-year students. First-year students are primarily in residence halls, quote-unquote dorms, traditional style or suite style. Housing for upperclassmen is different. All of our housing for upperclass students is apartment style. That means full kitchens. That means they have, as you see there, laundry and unit. There's a washer and dryer in every unit. They're going to be fully furnished, including common area furniture like table and chairs in the dining area, in the kitchen, couch and chairs and things like that in the common area. There's going to be semi-private baths. They're typically going to be sharing a bathroom with one other person. Sometimes they even have a bathroom to themselves, depending upon the unit. There's laundry in unit, like I said, 1 to 2 people. Sorry, that I should say 1 to 4 people per apartment. That got cut off. So apartments are either 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. It's mainly single bedrooms. There's a few double bedrooms, but for the most part, they're going to have their own bedroom, and it's 9 and 12-month contracts. If you go to our website and click on the virtual tour, you can pull up the upper class housing options and take a peek at those. So you can kind of look and see what they're like inside, get a sense of what that all looks like. We're also going to have a showcase, an apartment showcase on January 29th. We'll send information out to the students in the halls as well as over break. Well, they'll be able to go and actually go into the apartment buildings on campus and check out the apartments and see what they look like so they can decide where they want to live. All right, so the final question, the big one, do we have enough housing for our returning students? And the answer is, I'm not sure. Last year we did not. Last year we did not have enough housing. We had to have a number of students go on a wait list. This year I would anticipate it's probably going to be similar. Again, that's why we preference sophomores in the process, is to give them a better chance of getting housing, because we know that if a student's going off campus, we'd rather it be a junior or senior who has 2 years under their belt versus a sophomore who's only been here 1 year. If and when we do run out of housing, what we will do is anybody who has not selected a room at that time, we will email all of them with specific information. We'll confirm, yes, there's no on-campus housing currently available, but we will also let them know how to sign up for a wait list. Last year, we went on to a wait list. We had about 400 names on that wait list when we began. Everyone on that wait list was at least offered a space. Some people declined it, other people accepted it. But by around early June, we were able to get everybody on that wait list offered something. So that was pretty good. Ideally, we'd have more beds. We're working on that, but right now, we have what we have. But that wait list process worked pretty well. Only students that had a little rough time were students who weren't reading the emails and didn't get on the wait list and didn't follow the right steps to be able to secure housing. We were able to work with as many students as possible. But again, if and when we run out of housing, that there's no longer any on-campus housing available in the process, we will email all students and let them know what they can do. Last year, we were able to house most of the sophomores that wanted housing before we ran out. This year, it just depends. The number of beds we have available is the same. The number of the freshman classes are largely the same. So I'd anticipate a similar outcome. Now, one thing we did change last year, returning students had the ability to stay in the same building but move to different rooms. We've removed that from the process to ensure that we're bringing even more rooms to selection for sophomores to give them a better chance of getting on-campus housing. That we felt that was a good step to make to try to benefit our rising sophomore population. So that is what I have. If students are unable to get on-campus housing, if we run out of beds, one of the things that's also in that letter is to talk with them about off-campus housing process and the different resources. Lisa Matthews-Aylesworth is a tremendous resource for students. She's one of the best there is. VCU students are very lucky to have her to help them. So if they decide they want to live on campus from the off campus from the get-go, or if they're unable to secure housing with us and would like to look at off-campus options, she's a great person to work with them, so they're in good hands. I'll be here at the end for any questions, but again, once more, we'll be sending this home to y'all over winter break. And in here is all the dates, all the informations, right up on the specific things you need to do, general information about things like the showcase and all that stuff. So definitely be looking for that. If you don't see it, it will be on our website in the resources sections as a PDF. We'll also have copies for students when they return from break if they want to pick one up. All right, that's what I have. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa.
Really quick before we transition, we did have one question that came up that I just want to get addressed before we move to off-campus housing. Dr. Wade, are the sophomore selection time slots based on completed credits?
No. So when we use the term classification instead of class year because it's based upon how long they've been here. Someone who was a first-year student this last year, who currently is a first-year student, is considered a sophomore next year. So that's how we do that. It's how long they've been here. Anyone who is not currently a first-year student this year will be considered an upperclassman. The juniors and seniors we put together into one chunk. We don't do juniors then seniors. So as long as they're a first-year student this year, they're living in a first-year residence hall this year, they're going to be considered a sophomore in the returning student process based on classification. So no, we don't use credit hours.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. All right, Lisa, on to you.
Cool, no problem. My name is Lisa Matthews Aylesworth, and I work in the Dean of Students office helping students find off-campus housing. So I thought today what I would do is go ahead and take you guys through the process, be it if your student's looking for housing next year or at graduation or whatever it may be, just a refresher course for many of you about the whole rental process. And then this is also a preview, so that way you have a better idea of what the students can anticipate if they come to see me. I'll go through the same presentation with them and just also talk a little bit more about what our services are. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. Hopefully you guys can see that. Right? Can you see it? Great. So let's talk about timeline first. Sorry, did you say something, Lynn-Ann?
I was just saying, yep, we can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. So for the timeline, it's very similar to on campus in the fact that in February is when your student really wants to think about whether or not they want to be on or off campus. That's also when they'll probably most likely start talking to their roommates, current roommates, or friends about potentially living together in the future. It's also a good time for them to start thinking about what their budget is. Hopefully by now you guys have all filled out the FAFSA for next year. And if you have any questions about financial aid, just let us know. We can help you with that as well. And then I would highly encourage your student to come to one of our rental workshops where we will go through the same exact presentation with them. Then in March, I encourage them to start researching their different options and to attend our housing fair. So this year we've actually pushed back our fair by an additional week to hopefully accommodate for more students that may not make it throughout the housing lottery process. So our housing fair is on March 26th, and that's when we bring over 20 different landlords to campus to showcase all the different properties they have available. Then usually the rest of the semester is spent touring properties, solidifying their roommates, and then signing any leases that they choose, or sorry, signing a lease, please only sign one, but signing a lease with their roommates, getting everything lined up for next year. Most students try to, I guess, finish this process by finals, but for a lot of students, they can wait until summertime if they need to. And there's usually things always available up until August as well. So first steps first is thinking about price. For a lot of students, there's over 100 different options. So usually price is the first determinant as to what they're looking at. Some students go with how much they're paying this year to kind of find something about that same cost for next year, a little bit cheaper. But in short, if your student's looking for a studio or one-bedroom apartment, they're looking at spending over $1,000 a month after utilities. And then, of course, the more roommates they have, the cheaper things get. So if you're looking to stay under about $500 a month, then they're most likely going to need to share a bedroom with someone. Whereas if they do 4 or 5 bedrooms, it's still going to cost them about $500–600 a month after utilities. Please keep in mind, all these prices do not include furniture. So that's another thing to also calculate for. But in short, we estimate around $100 to $150 per unit for electricity. So you take that number and divide it by the number of tenants. For electricity, it's anywhere from like 50 to 100, or sorry, for internet, anywhere from $60 to $80 a month. So I put on here just 75 as an estimate. And then water trash is high in the city of Richmond, so I have about $90 a month for that. So you're looking at almost $300 per unit per month for utilities if they are not included in the rental price. So you take all those costs, divide them by the number of bedrooms or tenants, and that's how much your student would owe. Please keep in mind that for both processes, on campus and off campus, you can use financial aid to pay for your expenses. The difference would be the process. So if you're on campus, financial aid gets applied directly to their on-campus bill, whereas if they're off campus, that money would actually flow through your student or through yourself if you're using a Parent Plus loan. The second thing you'll want to do is, let me go back. Of course, like we said, the more roommates you have, the cheaper things are. There are 2 different types of leases in Richmond. One is called a joint lease. That's where your student signs a lease with roommates. They're all held equally accountable. So if there's 3 roommates, all 3 sign it, all 3 are responsible for the rent. Please keep in mind this does put a big burden on each of the roommates, because if one roommate can't pay their rent one month, then the other two need to cover them. Otherwise, all 3 roommates will be evicted. Alternatively, we encourage students to sign an individual lease. That's where a student would be renting out a bedroom in a unit. They're only financially responsible for themselves, but they would still have roommates. So if you had 3 roommates, they all sign their own leases. If roommate A can't pay their rent, it doesn't affect B or C in that case. There are only 6 properties in Richmond that offer individual leases. So if you'd like a list of those, please let me know and I can send that to you. Then next you'll want to talk about locations. We'll go to that in a second. But before we do that, all of the leases off campus are 12-month leases. So keep in mind, if you're looking for a 9-month lease, then I would highly encourage you to sign up for on campus. And then lastly, you'll want to think about whether or not your student wants a private landlord or corporate landlord. So private landlord is usually someone that owns 1 or 2 properties. It's considered an extension of their house, so it's very personal. If something breaks, you're usually contacting the landlord directly. You're writing a check to that landlord. It's just a very personal relationship. Whereas with corporate landlords, they are hired. There's a lot of staff on site, much more policies, procedures, and usually that corporation will own the entire building or multiple buildings in Richmond. So it's just a different formality or relationship with the landlord. So going to location, most of our students are all looking for something within walking distance. So these are the neighborhoods that are closest to VCU, with VCU being in the middle. So the first one you have is just north of us is the Carver neighborhood. That's made up of mostly row houses and some converted warehouses. And then to this, I guess, east of us is Jackson Ward. That's once again mostly row houses. There are some new apartment buildings in there and some converted warehouses. Then just south of there, you get into downtown or Monroe Ward. Those are all going to be your high-rise apartment buildings. Then directly south of VCU, you have Oregon Hill. That's all going to be 2 to 3 bedroom row houses. And then Randolph tends to be more of your standalone houses, 4 or 5 bedroom houses. Lastly, if you go west of VCU, you are in the Fan. That's going to be all row houses. And then just north of us is Newtown West, which is converted warehouses. So for some students, they know exactly what type of property they're looking for, so that helps narrow down the neighborhoods. For others, there's a particular neighborhood they like more than others. I will say each one has a very distinctive character to them. VCU has a great relationship with all the neighborhoods. Myself and my colleagues, we attend a lot of the neighborhood meetings and are very influential in the neighborhoods and meet with the different leaders on a regular basis, so we're in the know about what's going on in those neighborhoods. Regardless of the neighborhood, your student will want to keep in mind where Kroger is. So that's where the little caret is here above Carver. Kroger tends to be the grocery store that most students go to for groceries, just simply because it is the one within walking distance. So most students will find something that's close to their work, close to classes, as well as close to Kroger. And for some, the gym is also very important. So those are the different neighborhoods close to the Monroe Park campus. If your student's on the medical campus, keep in mind the closest neighborhood for them will most likely be Jackson Ward or down here in Shockoe Bottom and Shockoe Slip. So the next thing is, once your student has an idea of what they're looking for, is to start looking for options that meet their criteria. So there's lots of different websites out there like apartments.com, rent.com. I would highly encourage your student to use our website. Our website is a database of all the landlords that want VCU students. And I'll go ahead and show that to you real quick. So this is our website. It's just offcampus.vcu.edu. If you click on housing, it'll show you that there's 173 different options or apartment buildings that advertise with us. Your student can go in here and kind of pick out what they're looking for. Once again, most people, let's say if you're looking for something under $800 a room, most people use the price as their first determinant, but you can also click on more filters to kind of pick other options. So you can even pick something that's within 2 miles of campus, perhaps something that has laundry dryer in the unit. I always tell students to look for air conditioning. That's really important here in Richmond. We get very hot in the summertime. And for this fake search, we'll also put in furnished. And if you press search, it'll then limit those 107, I think it was 173 down to 18 different properties that offer those particular amenities. The other way you can use our site is if you click on the map feature, it'll show you where all the different properties are in conjunction with their classes, how close they are to campus, things like that. So if you click on one of them, it'll show you, sorry, that's a bad example. Let me find another one. Okay, so if you click on a property, it'll give you the name of the property. It'll tell you how much their rent is. Keep in mind that a lot of places will not put an actual rent on there because they do different specials throughout the year. So depending on when your student signs determines what their rental rate will be. But usually it doesn't fluctuate more than 20 or 30 bucks per month difference. It'll tell you what's included in regards to utilities, if any are included. It'll tell you what the features are for the unit. And then up here, it'll even give you different pictures of the property. Then if the property has different floor plans, you can click on floor plans and it'll tell you how much they cost. So this one only offers 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but some may have 2-bedroom, 1-bath, things like that. And then the other great thing about our website is you click on here to see the telephone number, or your student can actually click underneath and email the landlord directly to see if they have any vacancies. But this is the site that I would recommend most students using to look for properties and kind of do their research. There are different Facebook groups out there. One's called Housing Within VCU. There's the Virginia Commonwealth University Housing Roommate Sublets Facebook group. Those are Facebook groups tend to be more students that are looking for roommates versus our website is more fully vacant units. So depending on your student situation, there might be different avenues that work better than others for searching for different options. In addition to those, word of mouth is huge. So if your student knows any upperclassmen, have them talk to them about where they're currently living and what they currently think of their property as to whether or not it's a good one, a bad one. If a student finds a property, for example, your student's in class with a senior, that senior's leaving and graduating this year, perhaps your student can talk to the landlord and ask them if they can move into the property. We consider those passed down houses or grandfathered houses, I guess. With those, you want to make sure that your student is signing a new lease and not extending the current student's lease. So if you have any questions about that, just let me know. I can easily help you with those. So word of mouth is huge. Have them talk to them about recommendations. They can always keep their eyes and ears open. I'd be shocked every day I walk across campus. I always hear someone talk about their landlord or about their roommates. So just encourage them to talk to one another. And then as we get closer to the spring semester, you'll see more signs in yards. So we do have a lot of private landlords that don't advertise online. Instead, they just put a sign in their front window or in their front yard because they get enough foot traffic to fill the space easily. Regardless of which method you're using to find different options, please keep in mind what your student needs versus what they want. A lot of these properties have lots of bells and whistles, granite countertops, pools, tanning beds, all kinds of things to entice your student to live there. So please remind them that usually you get what you pay for. So if it seems too cheap, possibilities are that it's not a great property. So regardless, I encourage you to look at reviews. That'll usually give you an insight as to what the reputation of the property is. For that, you can just go to Google, type in the name of the landlord or the property, and you'll see Google reviews will pop up. We already went over our site, so I'll skip over that. Also on our site, if you click under resources, we have a spreadsheet that you're welcome to download and utilize. I encourage students to use this to kind of keep track of all their different options. For a lot of these students, they'll be looking at 4, 5, 6 different properties. So this just allows them to estimate what the cost would be per month, as well as keep notes as to which ones are furnished, which ones are close to campus, all those different things, as well as keep track of who they've contacted, which properties they've toured, and things like that. While your student's looking at properties, I would also encourage them to start looking for roommates. If your student signs an individual lease, they're not required to find a roommate. The landlord will actually put them with roommates, being that they are just renting out the bedroom. However, your student still has the opportunity to choose their roommate if they want. So regardless of where they live, I still encourage them to find roommates. The nice thing is with the individual leases is they're not required to find them. They're not financially bound to those roommates. Whereas with a joint lease, they will be required to find the roommates and they are financially bound to them. So if your student is looking at a 1-bedroom unit, then they're on their own, so you don't have to worry about roommates. But if they're looking at a 2, 3, or 4-bedroom unit and it's a joint lease, they will have to pay the full rental rate of the property until they get it filled. So please encourage them to start talking to roommates now, and also encourage them to be honest with one another. If someone contacts them and they're not interested in living with them, to just tell them that they're not interested or that they have other people in mind. Some of the best roommates, or sorry, let me back up. There's also roommates and housemates. So roommates tend to be the people that your student wants to be social with, hang out with, get to know on a personal basis. Whereas a housemate is more someone you live with to keep the cost down. They do their thing, you do your thing. It's very separate, I guess, social lives, whereas roommates tend to have more integrated lives. So please encourage your student to think about which one they want and then look for students that want the same. Typically, if a roommate is put with a housemate, that's when tension starts to rise, when that housemate's trying to be pulled into social events that they don't want to be involved in, and there's just more social pressure. Whereas if everyone in the house is good with just being housemates, then usually everyone does their own thing, comes and goes when they want, and just communicates as needed. So once again, some of the best roommates, housemates tend to be friends of friends, because that means there may be some similarities there already. People in their student organizations, and then also classmates. So please encourage them to talk to anybody and everybody. And then the things that they'll want to discuss are definitely expectations. So for most students, the most important thing is going to be respect, communication, and also someone with a stable income. Not necessarily someone that likes the same colors, likes to do the same things on the weekend, but someone that's going to be responsive and be a responsible roommate. If your student doesn't have any roommates in mind, I'd encourage them to check out our website. So once again, if they go to our website and create an account, they can click on roommates, and there's a whole section here for roommates. So right now we have, and it's December, we have 58 students looking for roommates for either spring semester or fall semester. If your student has no house and no roommates, I encourage those to click on have a place first. That way the student can see, okay, is this someone they're interested in living with? And is that person living somewhere they might be interested in living? Kind of helps them kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Versus if they click on the ones that don't have a place yet, that need a place. We have 52 students that need both roommates and a place. So this is a good way to start if they already kind of know where they want to live, but just need a roommate to help fill it. I encourage your student to create a good roommate profile. So that's something with a picture, their name, a little bit about themselves, and then underneath it'll allow them put information about what they're looking for in a roommate, as well as put information about themselves and what they're looking for in a unit. Also with that, as similar to the housing section, with the roommate section, students can also email one another through here, as well as call or text one another. So please encourage them to check out this portion of the website. And if they're having any difficulty locating roommates, have them reach out to me and I can try to help match them with other people. We used to do mixers. Unfortunately, now we don't do that as often. So instead, it's more on a personal basis. So if they come and meet with me, I can help them filter through all the different roommates to find someone that might be a good match for them. Once your student has a couple properties in mind and hopefully some roommates in mind, I would encourage the roommate sets or your student to go take a tour of the property. If it's a corporation, almost all the corporations have model units, so you can walk in off the street and take a tour of their model unit as well as their common areas. However, if it's a private landlord or a particular unit that they're looking at, they may have to arrange a tour up to a week in advance. When they go on a tour, make sure that they're taking their phones with them, any potential roommates they have, as well as possibly taking you all and their ID. All properties will require them to show ID in order to take a tour. Once they're in the property, we encourage them to think about their senses. So how does the property look? Does it look like it's being taken care of, that it's maintained well, or are things just painted over and kind of brushed under the carpet? How does it smell? Does it smell good? Can you smell someone cooking next door, smoking outside? Does it smell moldy or musty? If it's moldy or musty, that might be signs of water damage. And then lastly, how does it sound? Is it pretty soundproof? Are you near railroad tracks, near a bar that might get out in the middle of the night? Those types of things can all get really annoying when you're having to deal with it on a daily basis, day after day. While they're on the tour, I encourage them to ask what type of lease it is. The lease type, individual versus joint, is set by the landlord. If it's a private landlord, you may be able to negotiate with them to write separate leases for each student. However, if it's a corporation, almost all of them will say, take it or leave it, this is what we offer. You can also ask about average utility expenses, keeping in mind the bigger the unit, the more it's going to cost to heat or cool it. Whereas internet and water trash tend to be the same regardless of the size of unit. Keep in mind that the closest grocery store is always going to be Kroger, so how far do they want to walk? If they're living in the Fan, there is a Whole Foods that's going to be opening up soon, so that might be closer for them. And then ask about maintenance issues. So on campus this year, if something broke, they went online and reported it. Most properties have a similar process off campus, but they just want to verify that, whereas some have 1-800 numbers that they have to call in case anything breaks. Also ask about the rent payment process. No place will accept cash. Everywhere accepts usually check or money order. And usually your rent's always due by the 1st. And if it's not in by the 1st, usually on the 5th is when they'll start applying late charges and start discussing evictions. Once students have toured a bunch of properties, usually I encourage them to tour at least 2 to 3 properties before making their decision. They'll want to think about the condition, location, which one's the nicest, fanciest, most close to their classes, most convenient as the place they want to live. But also keep in mind safety. So is it in an area that's well lit? Would they feel safe coming home at 2, 3 in the morning? If not, they may want to choose a different place to live. Once your student has toured the property, then they'll be able to put in an application. That's how you start to, I guess, solidify your spot. Applications do usually have a cost associated with them. So portion of the fee is going to be non-refundable. That money will be used to run a credit check and background check on your student. Most students fail the financial check, so they'll be required to find a cosigner or a guarantor. So that's someone with a social security number, a credit score above 550, and makes 3 times the monthly rent. That person signs on the lease as well, just stating that if the tenant, the student, doesn't pay, then that person, guarantor, cosigner, would pay in their absence. Keep in mind that if it's a joint lease, sometimes they only require 1 cosigner for the entire unit. Other properties require 1 cosigner per tenant. And if it's a joint lease, all cosigners and all tenants would all be equally held accountable if the rent is not paid on time. Also during this step, after you put in the application, or actually before, I would ask that you guys check out online reviews. Just make sure it is a property you're interested in before you spend any money progressing. Once your application has been accepted, it usually takes 2 to 5 days to process, 2 to 7 days to process. And then at that time, the landlord will send electronically a copy of the lease. Please read the lease. If you'd like me to read it, please let me know. You can just email it to me and I can review it with you. But it'll have start end dates on there, so your student can sign a lease tomorrow if they wanted to, and it may not start till next year. It'll tell you what costs are included. It'll tell you when the rent's due, where's it due, how's it due. It'll tell you what to do in case of maintenance issues. It'll say that it's binding. So typically if a student wants out of the lease, they have to find somebody to take it over, either through a sublease situation or through a relet situation. And there'll also be lots of different policies about guests, smoking, pets. Make sure you read that because your student will be held accountable to that. But they can also use those policies to hold their neighbors or roommates accountable. Most of all, look for the renewal clause. So almost all leases in Richmond run for 12 months, so August to August. But then they automatically renew for another year if the student does not give notification that they want to leave. So typically around spring break is when I tell students to notify their landlord if they're staying or leaving. It will say in the lease if it's 60 days, 90 days, or longer than that, that they have to give notice. So usually spring break is a good benchmark to use. When you go to sign lease, almost all students will have to pay for their first month's rent and security deposit. So those costs do have to come out of pocket. Typically they're due when you sign the lease. So being that you won't receive financial aid till September and you sign your lease usually in March or April, you'll want to keep those costs in mind now so you can start saving for them. Also keep in mind that if it's a joint lease, as soon as your student signs, it becomes binding. So if your student goes and signs first and the other roommates never show up, your student could be held accountable for the entirety of the lease. So please have them all go sign at the same time. After you've signed the lease, you're like 90% of the way there. Before moving, you'll definitely want to fill out a tenant agreement amongst the students. So that's where they go through and talk about who's responsible for what, who's paying how much. If it's an individual lease, then each student will already know how much they're paying. But if it's a joint lease, it's up to the tenants to decide. So if it's a 3-bedroom house and there's 3 tenants, they could each pay $500 if the total rent's $1,500. Or they could say, okay, roommate A has a bigger bedroom with a walk-in closet, so maybe they pay $600 and each of the other students would only have to pay $450. It's completely up to them to determine how much they want to pay. The landlord just wants to make sure they get their full $1,500 every single month. At that time, you'll also want to make sure you start thinking about renter's insurance. Almost all leases require you to have renter's insurance. And for most students, they are covered under your homeowner's insurance if you have that. If not, you can usually add renter's insurance on for as little as $100 a year. Prior to move-in, you'll want to start contacting all the utility companies and getting different accounts set up. Keep in mind that a lot of the accounts will require a deposit, so you'll want to start saving for those and discussing who's paying for what. If it's a joint lease and utilities are not included, then it's up to the students to open up accounts. I encourage those students to each put an account in a different roommate's name. If roommate A puts all the utilities under their name and then gets in a fight with B and C, and roommates B and C don't pay them, roommate A would be held accountable. Whereas if roommate A has their name on electricity, roommate B has theirs on gas, and roommate C has theirs on water trash, then they're all kind of equally accountable to one another in regards to payments. You also want to think about parking passes. So if your students bring in a car, they may be required to get a parking pass at their property, and or they may want to get one at VCU as well. Just like on campus, they'll want to talk to the roommates about who's bringing what in regards to furniture, dishes, linens, all those different types of things. And if your student ever needs help with budgets, let us know. We can definitely help them determine how much they have to spend, as well as come up with a spending plan for the following months. In addition to that, before you guys move in, I would encourage you to talk to landlord about your move-in day. A lot of leases may state that it starts on July 1st, but if the office is closed on July 1st, you wouldn't be able to get the keys. So you want to call the landlord ahead of time to verify that the day and time that you guys are looking to move in, that the landlord will be available to get you the keys. When you do go pick up the keys, you then have 5 days to fill in a move-in inspection form. So that's where your student walks through the property, notes the condition of everything. Please take pictures of the unit, as well as keep copies of that document for yourselves, as well as turn them into the landlord, because that's the document the student will be used, or sorry, that the landlord will use to determine how much your student owes once they move out. And I know this is super premature, but I encourage students to start thinking about move out early. So if roommates A, B, and C are all moving in August, but roommate A is leaving in May and B and C are staying for the entire year, they'll want to have a discussion, especially if roommate A brought all the furniture and dishes and everything and they're moving out earlier. The other roommates should know about that, so that way they can come up with a plan as to whether or not they're going to use roommate A's items or get their own, or just come up with a plan for move out, as well as cleaning. Students are required to clean out the property once they go to move out, and note that if things are left behind, they can be charged by the landlord for the removal of items. So we encourage students to come up with a move out plan. If they need help with that, just let us know. Throughout the entire process, we encourage them not to fix anything if it breaks, but rather report it to the landlord. If they try to fix items and they don't fix it to code, they could get held accountable. So if anything breaks, encourage them to report it. Once your student goes to move out, once the last tenant moves out, the landlord will do a move out inspection. That's where they'll walk through the property, judge it according to how dirty, how much damage there is. And then they have 45 days to send you a bill stating what the charges were, if there were any charges. If there weren't any charges, the student should get their full security deposit back. And once again, there's a 45-day period on that. Everything is summarized on our website, so feel free to check that out. And if you have any questions, I'm available anytime. If your student's interested in meeting with us, they can go to our website at offcampus.vcu.edu and then click on this little link right here takes you straight to our schedule, and they can pick out whatever time they want to meet with us and discuss anything, be it the rental process, roommates, whatever it may be. Keep in mind, we only meet with students face-to-face between 8 and 5 p.m. Anytime after that, we meet virtually. So we will meet with students up until 10 p.m. virtually if they're interested. I think that covers everything I had in regards to off-campus. So let me go ahead and switch this back. Maybe. Linnea, can you just take it back over?
Yep, I think so. Hang on just a second. I can stop screen sharing.
Yay. Okay, that works.
Okay. Oh, no, I can't. Well, that's okay. We are, we're going to open things up to questions. So we do have a few people who are still with us live. So does anyone have any questions for Lisa or for Dr. Wade about on or off campus housing options? You can either unmute yourself on the microphone, or you can type your questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. While we're seeing if anyone has any questions, I'll go ahead and pose one that I think may be helpful. If I'm a parent and I haven't started a conversation with my student or heard them talking at all about housing options, when should those conversations be happening? Is this immediately? Is this something we can kind of wait until the beginning of the new year? What's a good timeline?
I think there's a reason we send the information home over winter break. I think that's the best time. We don't give too much during first term, during fall term related to it, because we really want especially our incoming first year students to focus on their first term before start to think about next year. But I think that's the time to have the conversation. And I think it's having sort of real conversations about what the different options entail. A lot of times students will have this grand idea of living off campus in a house with 10 of their friends, and to talk about what that really might be like and if that's really what you think is the best option for them. But we send that home over break with the hope that you get it in the mail and open it up and use that as a way to start that conversation.
Great, thank you.
Just again,
And we did have a question that came through. It says, which on-campus residence halls are available for sophomores?
Sure. Available for sophomores. There's one building called Carey and Belvedere that houses our sophomore year experience. It's apartment style. It is only for sophomores. That's a building that only sophomores can live in. In addition to that, we have buildings that can house any upperclassmen. The buildings that are available for those students is Accommodations Residence Center, which is over on Broad Street. Grace and Broad, which is also on Broad Street. What's the other one? Broad and Belvedere, which is also on Broad Street. And then we have West Grace South and West Grace North, which are on West Grace Streets. So those are the halls that are available for upperclassmen. Our first year halls by design are around Monroe Park in the center of campus. Our upper class housing is a little bit more on the further out from the center of campus. Again, that's by design. Once they become a sophomore, junior, senior, they no campus, it's a little bit easier for them to get around. So that's why we have those halls. And by no means are they like out in the middle of nowhere. They're just, maybe 2 blocks from the center of campus versus being right in the middle of things.
Great, thank you. And now, Melanie, I noticed that you had used the raise your hand function. Did you have a question that you'd like to pose? All right, anyone else have questions for either Dr. Wade about on-campus housing or Lisa Matthews-Aylesworth about off-campus housing?
Well, one thing I will add is that if a student fills out the housing application, they don't have to pick housing. They could fill out the housing application by the deadline and just not do anything. And then they're never bound to the contract. They're not going to be billed for housing. They won't be living on campus. They aren't actually assigned to housing until they go in and select a room. So filling out the housing application is there's no reason they shouldn't do it, even if they're unsure what they want to do, even if they're sure they probably want to go off campus. It doesn't hurt to have that as an option, because what they could do is, they might say, I want to live on campus, but only if I can live in Broad and Belvedere. That's the only place I want to live. Well, they can go in, they can fill out the application. When it's their turn to pick a room, they can go see if Broad and Belvedere is available. If it is, they can sign up for it. If not, they just don't do anything, and then they can look for off-campus housing. That we do know when our process is over is when a lot of students start looking for off-campus housing. So they don't need to feel sort of a pressure or rush to do things right away. They might hear that from some landlords or from other students, but they have a vested interest in our students making decisions earlier and making more rash decisions because they want to fill their beds. But there's really no reason for them to wait. Even last year, when we didn't have enough housing, students were able to find places to live somewhere. Some stayed with us for the wait list, other people went off campus, and some of those students were looking for housing, even into the summer. There's not as much available, but there's still things available. So they shouldn't feel a rush or any type of pressure to make a decision right away. If they're unsure, they can ask to talk with Lisa or myself or both of us, and we can, help them talk through things. But they shouldn't feel that. If they feel anxiety, they shouldn't. They should feel anxiety about, finishing up their first year and, who they want to live with. They shouldn't feel anxiety about, rushing to make a decision.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Again, you can ask a question by unmuting yourself, unmuting the microphone, or by utilizing the chat function at the bottom of your screen. You can just hit the chat box and type that chat or that question into the chat box, and we'll pose it to the group. While we're waiting just to see if anyone else has a question, I'll go ahead and do a plug for our final webinar of the semester. Next Tuesday, December 10th, again at 11 a.m., we have our final webinar for families of the semester, and it's called Oh, the Places They'll Go, and it's about studying abroad. And so if your student is considering study abroad, which we hope they are, it's a really great opportunity, a really great experience, and makes them very marketable when it comes to being able to talk with future employers about their experience as a global citizen. If they are thinking about that, we're going to have Stephanie Tigner from our Global Education Office, who's going to share with us about the process, the cost, which is very uniquely not what people always think it is. Sometimes it is the same cost as studying at VCU, and in some cases even less. So she'll talk a little bit about that, kind of debunking the myths about studying abroad, and how to begin planning that process with your students. So if you can join us next week, we'd love to have you. Oh, it looks like we have something coming through the chat. Oh, they just said great information, thank you. So we'll wrap it up there since no other questions have come through. Thank you so much, Dr. Wade and Lisa, for your time with us. We really appreciate it. And again, we will make this recording available so that if there was something you missed or you joined us halfway, you can access that on our family blog, our VCU Families blog, and that should be accessible within the next day or so after we get it closed captioned. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.